Welcome to Cruise News, your daily update on everything happening at sea. Visit cruisenews.io to see today's stories and sign up for email alerts.
So imagine your next vacation. Are you, sitting in this silent, kid-free sanctuary just sipping complimentary champagne?
Sounds pretty nice.
Right. Or are you maybe watching acrobats dive into a pool next to a robotic bartender alongside like 7,000 other people?
Also sounds like a good time, just a very different vibe.
Exactly. Because today, our reporting is looking really closely at how cruise lines are basically fundamentally reshaping the passenger experience for 2026 and 2027. We're seeing this massive shift in how these vacations are packaged and priced.
Yeah, the whole industry is going through this structural restructuring, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
And we're tracking a really clear through line today. So we'll start with the macro forces, right? Like how global geopolitics are forcing companies to, completely rethink their pricing to deal with the friction of just getting you to the port.
Which is a huge headache right now. Right. And then from there, we'll look at how ships are getting incredibly strict about curating who is actually allowed to sail, specifically this huge adults-only movement.
Yeah, that one is fascinating.
It is. And finally, we'll sort of flip to the exact opposite end of the spectrum and look at these massive branded entertainment hubs that the mainstream lines are building to just dazzle whoever steps aboard.
Yeah, so before anyone can even, start deciding between a quiet luxury sailing or a floating theme park, you have to navigate the reality of actually paying for the trip.
Exactly. The budget.
Right. And budgeting for a vacation a year or two out right now is, it's really complicated by global energy markets. So before you even get on the ship, you have to get there.
Yeah, that's the real friction point right now. Consumer hesitation is probably the biggest hurdle for the industry because the cost of just getting to the gangway it's fluctuating wildly.
Completely. Which is largely driven by fuel cost uncertainty. Which brings us to some pretty interesting reporting out of Europe.
Right, the CFC announcement.
Yeah, so the French cruise line, Compagnie Française de Croisière, or CFC, they just made this big public announcement that they are completely freezing their 2026 and 2027 pricing.
Wow.
Yeah, they're holding their fares and their itineraries entirely steady all the way through March 2027.
Which is a huge commitment. And the president of CFC, Maëlys Pirot-Guibord, she put out a statement basically framing this as a direct response to reassure passengers.
Right, giving them some stability.
Exactly. She explicitly pointed to how airfares are gradually increasing because of, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East and that fuel uncertainty.
Yeah.
So CFC wants to guarantee that their pricing policy won't be touched. No price hikes, no itinerary modifications due to that geopolitical friction.
And honestly, the context here is something that I think every traveler is feeling because fuel price volatility is just unavoidable right now.
Oh, totally.
I mean, just look at how, gas prices jumped literally overnight following the U.S. bombing of Iran. That kind of thing instantly injects all this fresh uncertainty into the energy markets.
Right, and that bleeds straight into your household travel budget.
Exactly. So looking at what CFC is doing here, holding their fares flat through 2027, it honestly feels a bit like locking in a fixed rate mortgage while the housing market around you is just going totally crazy.
That's a really good way to put it.
But I do have to ask, is a frozen cruise fare actually enough to protect a traveler's budget? Or is it maybe like a bit of a distraction from the real budget buster, which is volatile international airfare?
Well, I wouldn't call it a distraction. It's actually a really substantial financial commitment from the cruise line. Because, you have to remember the underlying mechanics here. Ships consume just staggering amounts of fuel.
Oh, yeah, true.
So when oil spikes, a cruise line's operating expenses just skyrocket. Usually the industry either hedges fuel costs or they just pass that volatility straight on to you, the consumer.
Right, through higher base rates or those annoying fuel surcharges.
Exactly. So for CFC to absorb that potential shock themselves and promise not to pass it on through early 2027, that's a very real benefit.
Okay, that makes sense.
But, the caveat you brought up is definitely the crucial part. The total door-to-door cost of a vacation is what actually matters, right? That's what heavily depends on flight volatility.
Because if your cruise fare is locked at, say, $2,000, but then the flight to actually get to the embarkation port suddenly doubles in price, your overall budget is totally blown anyway.
Precisely. And that's why our reporting is also highlighting this really practical advice from travel expert Scott Lara over at Cruise Genius.
Yeah, his take on this was super interesting.
He makes the definitive point that airfare is the true variable here. Because airline pricing algorithms, They react to short-term oil spikes way faster than a scheduled cruise fare does.
So what's his actual strategy for dealing with that? Because he's actively advising travelers to hold off on buying flights for like a month or two, right?
Yeah, exactly. The logic there is that if you let the immediate shock waves of a geopolitical event sort of settle, it might allow oil prices to ease up a bit. And that gives the airline algorithms a chance to recalibrate downward.
Got it. But he also drew a really sharp line depending on where you're actually flying, didn't he?
He did. The destination really dictates your exposure here.
Mm.
Laura warns that if you're looking at long-haul flights, so say you're heading over to Munich or Frankfurt to catch a European sailing, those are highly sensitive to fuel loads.
So those prices are almost certainly going up.
Right. But by contrast, if you're flying domestic or just shorter routes like heading to Chicago or flying down to Cancun, he predicts those fares will probably remain relatively stable.
Okay, so a lot less pressure in the near term for shorter hops.
Exactly. But regardless of whether you're flying to Florida or Frankfurt, Laura's strongest recommendation right now is the absolute necessity of travel insurance.
Oh, 100%. And he isn't just talking about, getting your money back if you catch a cold before the trip.
No, not at all. He's pointing out the very real logistical nightmare of getting stranded. Travelers literally getting stuck in international airports due to these fast-moving geopolitical disruptions.
Which is terrifying.
It is. Travel insurance gives you that peace of mind. It's shifted from just being this optional add-on to basically a mandatory part of your baseline budget.
Right, it gives you that logistical cover if airspace suddenly closes while you're in transit.
Exactly.
So, okay, once a traveler actually navigates all those financial hurdles, right? They lock in the budget, they secure the flight, they get on the ship. The next huge shift for 2026 is strictly defining who they're going to be sharing that vacation with.
Yes. The curation of the crowd. This is becoming one of the most competitive battlegrounds in the whole industry right now.
It really is. And Oceania Cruises is making a sweeping play here. They're launching this massive campaign called The Joy of Traveling Well.
Right.
It's rolling out across TV, digital onboard touch points. But it's paired with this, honestly, monumental operational shift. Oceania is transitioning to an entirely adults-only 18-plus fleet for any bookings made after January 7th, 2026.
It's a huge move. And the rationale, according to Jason Montague, is their chief luxury officer.
Yeah.
It comes straight from guest feedback.
What do the guests say?
Basically, they're demanding a calmer environment. Montague said guests want the freedom to explore at your own pace, and you really only get that guaranteed tranquility when you restrict the demographics.
But wait, the entire fleet. I mean, it's one thing to launch a brand new adults-only concept from scratch, but retrofitting an entire legacy brand to just start turning away families, that feels like a massive shift.
It definitely is.
It's like they're operating these ships less like public parks where, everyone is welcome, and way more like these exclusive bouncer-guarded boutique hotels.
That's exactly the vibe they're going for. They are heavily leaning into exclusivity to justify a premium product. Ocean is building this new 18-plus identity around four main pillars.
Okay, what are they?
So it's immersive itineraries, intimate ships, genuine hospitality, and what they call the finest cuisine at sea.
Okay. And to reinforce that whole boutique hotel feel, they're also rolling out that Your World Included bundle, right?
Yes, the bundling is key here. So the base fare now includes Starlink Wi-Fi, all your shipboard gratuities, laundry services, and gourmet specialty dining.
Wow, laundry's huge.
It really is. And on top of that, guests get a choice. You can either take a shore excursion credit, which applies to over 8,000 tools globally, or you can opt for free wine and beer during lunch and dinner.
So they're essentially just removing all the friction of constant upcharges.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which appeals heavily to that luxury demographic. And industry data completely backs up why Oceania is pivoting so hard. The adult-only travel market is projected to nearly double. It's expected to go from $9.2 billion in 2024 to $18.1 billion by 2033.
That is wild. And I mean, we're seeing that momentum validated right now by Virgin Voyages. Our reporting shows they just had a record-breaking wave season.
Yeah, and their CEO, Nirmal Savramutu, reported that their revenue jumped by 30%.
30%.
Yeah, and he specifically said that kid-free travel is, quote, not a niche category, it's a movement.
A move. Okay, but let me push back on that a little bit, because if you look at the mainstream lines, they're mostly just like carving out little adult spaces. Royal Caribbean has the Solarium, NCL has Spice H2O, Carnival is doing like 3 specific adult-only sailings in 2026.
They're dipping their toes in.
Right. But then you have P&O Cruises, who is actually reverting the Aurora and the Arcadia back to family-friendly ships in December 2026.
Right.
So if Virgin's CEO says this is a movement, but P&O is literally retreating from it, isn't an entire adults-only fleet a massive financial gamble for Oceania?
It's a gamble, sure, but it's a very calculated risk.
Mhm.
It really just comes down to the classic tension between volume versus yield.
Explain that.
Well, P&O reverting those ships shows that filling a vessel week after week is sometimes a lot easier when you welcome multi-generational families, because a family might book 3 or 4 cabins at once, right? So P&O is chasing volume. Oceania, on the other hand, is chasing yield. They're betting that this bundled luxury and a guaranteed quiet atmosphere will command such premium loyalty that they don't need to fill as many raw cabins.
Because the adults booking them are paying a much higher premium up front.
Exactly.
Okay, well, that brings us to the exact opposite philosophy. Because while the luxury lines are, kicking the kids off and focusing on quiet immersion, the mainstream megaships are looking at the exact same market and doing something totally different for 2026.
Oh, completely different. They are building massive, loud, IP-driven entertainment districts to specifically capture those multi-generational crowds.
Yeah, the scale of this is just hard to wrap your head around. Royal Caribbean is debuting America's Got Talent live on their new ship, the Legend of the Seas, in August 2026.
Right. They partnered with Fremantle for this. Erica Gadecki, their EVP, is basically translating the whole TV franchise into a rotating live experience for the Royal Theatre.
Yeah, musicians, magicians, acrobats, the whole deal.
And Christine Coachman from Royal Caribbean said this is all about redefining live entertainment at sea.
Well, they definitely have the space for it. The Legend of the Seas is the 3rd Icon-class ship. It's 250,800 gross tons.
Which is just staggering.
It holds up to 7,600 guests, and it's currently being outfitted over in Finland. But America's Got Talent is just one piece of this.
Oh, yeah, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Because when you have 7,600 people on board, you need engineered crowd control. You have to spread them out.
Right. So they also have a full stage production of Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yep.
They have the Aqua Theater with high divers and literally robots.
Robots.
Yeah. Plus Absolute Zero, which is the largest ice arena at sea. And then this whole nightlife ecosystem, the Hollywoodland Supper Club, dueling pianos, a jazz venue called Lou's.
It's sensory overload by design. And their deployment strategy for it is super calculated, too. It debuts in July 2026, doing Western Mediterranean routes, so Barcelona, Rome, Marseille. And then in November 2026, it repositions to Fort Lauderdale for Caribbean sailings to Aruba, Curacao, and Perfect Day at Coco Cay.
Honestly, looking at the sheer density of this stuff, it's like they picked up the Las Vegas Strip and just dropped it on top of a 250,000-ton hull.
That's exactly what it is.
But with all these global TV franchises and massive West End-style productions, are these megaships even competing with other cruise lines anymore, or are they directly taking on land-based mega resorts?
They are absolutely taking on the land-based resorts. That's the whole strategy. By using globally recognized brands like AGT or the Roald Dahl catalog, they severely lower the barrier to entry for first-time cruisers.
How does that lower the barrier?
Because it creates instant familiarity. If you've never cruised before, you might be worried about feeling trapped at sea. But if you know and love America's Got Talent, that IP bridges the gap. The ship itself becomes the primary destination.
Oh, I see. So it totally differentiates them from the intimate destination focus of a line like Oceania.
Exactly. The mainstream lines are basically saying, hey, you don't need to fly to a resort in Vegas. We build it right here, and we'll sail it around the Caribbean for you.
Wow. Okay, so we're really looking at 2 entirely different universes of vacationing here.
We are, and I think that's the big takeaway from all this reporting. The cruise industry of 2026 and 2027 is fundamentally splitting into 2 distinct philosophies.
Yeah.
You're either booking passage on this massive floating city packed with global TV franchises and 7,000 of your neighbors.
Right.
Or you're paying a real premium for a highly curated, kid-free sanctuary. The middle ground is just disappearing. But, whichever one you choose, you still have to navigate the volatile geopolitics and airfare just to get to the port.
Which is the real trick, right?
Exactly.
Well, thanks for listening to Cruise News. Visit cruisenews.io to catch up on the latest updates and sign up for free email alerts.